Let's face something uncomfortable. You've been told all your life that light is good and darkness is bad, that honesty wins, that compassion leads, and that decency is always rewarded. But if that were true, how many good people would be left broken, overlooked, and even silenced? Maybe darkness isn't the enemy. Maybe it has a side no one taught you to understand, one that Machiavelli saw and used. He didn't write The Prince to glorify evil. He wrote it because he saw how the world actually works and not how it pretends to. He understood something most people ignore. Sometimes survival requires shadows. Sometimes protection means power. And sometimes being too good is the most dangerous thing you can be. Let me ask you something. How many times have you done the right thing only to be betrayed by someone who didn't do the right thing? And that's not all. How many times have you stayed quiet to avoid conflict, only to be pushed further? Well, many talk about the advantages of staying in the light, but that's the price you pay when you embrace it without ever understanding what darkness really is. We're taught that darkness is something to fear, something to run from, but Machiavelli teaches something different, and to be honest, this is something most people will never dare to admit. Darkness has value, and it's not your usual value. Its value is to protect the good people from being devoured. But that's not all Machiavelli has to say about darkness. You see, most people believe that simply being good is enough. They think that if they're kind, generous, and honest, the world will repay them in kind. But the world doesn't work like that. Take this, for example. There's the co-worker who works tirelessly, always plays fair, but never gets promoted. The one who listens, supports, and goes the extra mile for everyone, but is always the one left behind. It's not that these people aren't valuable. The truth is, they don't know how to appear dangerous when it counts. And that's what Machiavelli offers. His knowledge is not a blueprint for evil, but a permission slip to stop being the prey. Machiavelli believed that morality is not an obstacle, it's a weapon, but only if you know how to wield it. Let that sink in you. If you think goodness means allowing yourself to be stepped on, used, and discarded, then you haven't understood goodness at all. You've understood weakness. You've mistaken compliance for character, because true goodness requires boundaries, and boundaries require strength. And strength, well, let's just say to some extent it requires darkness. That means saying no. That means being silent when others expect you to speak. That means knowing when to smile and when to show your teeth. But most importantly, it means knowing when to retreat into the shadows and when to strike from them. People hear Machiavelli and think manipulation, deception, and cruelty. But what he actually taught was clarity. He taught people to see human nature as it is, not as they wish it to be. To see the wolves beneath the polite smiles. To see the self-interest in every compliment. And to realize that if you're not aware of it, you're already being played. But that's not all Machiavelli has in his arsenal. He also teaches that darkness is not always the enemy. Sometimes it's the armor. Because when you embrace the shadows with the aim not to harm but to protect, you stop being easy to manipulate. You stop being emotionally available to people who only show up when they want something. You begin to move in silence. You become unpredictable, and in doing so, you gain power, not over others, but over yourself. And that's what truly terrifies people. A person who is calm, unreadable, strategic, can't be controlled. They don't beg, they don't justify, because they know how to operate in the light and in the dark. So ask yourself this: have you confused virtue with submission? Have you stayed in the light so long that you've blinded yourself to the dangers around you? Have you forgotten that kindness without power isn't respected, it's pitied? Because the people who rise, the people who shape history, are not always the loudest, the kindest, or the most honest. They are the ones who learn how to combine empathy with awareness and goodness with edge. They are the ones who don't just survive in the shadows, they know how to use them, and to learn that the world doesn't care about your intentions, Look at how people with good hearts are ripped apart because of their goodness. The world doesn't care about intentions. No, no. It only cares about your impact on its society. Because predators don't attack based on who you are, they attack based on what you seem. And if you seem soft, if you seem afraid of conflict, and to make matters even worse, you are not seen as noble, you are seen as easy. The world will be harsh. Even Machiavelli warned us about this. He once stated, "It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." His words might seem cruel to some extent, however they aren't. They are just means of survival, a strategy to maneuver through the thorns of the world, because if the people around you don't respect your boundaries, it's not always because they're bad. It's often because you've allowed them to believe you're harmless, and harmless is not the same as good. So you might be wondering, what if I accept darkness as strength and is actually good? How does it give me in return? Well, darkness gives you a presence. It gives you silence that feels dangerous. It gives you unpredictability that forces others to think twice before moving against you. Think of the most respected person you know. They don't speak too much. They don't overshare. They don't need to prove themselves to anyone, because they've mastered the art of withholding, and that is one of the most underrated forms of darkness power. When you become someone who doesn't need to be seen to be respected, who doesn't need to shout to be heard, who doesn't need to fight to win, you've stopped being a player, you've become the board. And as always, the board at all times will have the bigger share of the pie. But that's not all. Darkness allows you to master emotional control. This is something most people never master even in their lifetime. The world tells you to express yourself, but sometimes expression is exposure, and exposure is vulnerability. Think of the last time someone made you angry. Did they win because they were right, or did they win because they made you lose your balance? The moment you react without thinking, they've taken control. You've given them your power. Machiavelli also quoted this in one of his teachings. He taught that a wise man must act with coldness and calculation, not because he feels nothing, but because he refuses to be ruled by what he feels. That's why darkness matters. Because in the shadows, your emotions settle. Your mind sharpens. You're no longer reacting. You're choosing. And choice is everything. Think about it. Why do some people walk into a room and instantly command attention? It's not just about confidence, it's not just style, it's distance, it's the way they disappear, only to return when it matters most. Some call it arrogance, however, that's wisdom. Because when you make yourself too easy to reach, you stop being a person, you become a utility, and utilities are used, then replaced. Even Machiavelli supports this. He would say, never let people grow too familiar, because when they do, they stop seeing your value. They start expecting you to give endlessly. And when you stop giving, they get angry, not because they love you, but because they depended on your weakness. And that's the moment you realize you were never loved, you were only tolerated. But that realization, that pain, that betrayal, that's your turning point. So what do you do now? You stop offering explanations to people who never deserved them. You stop chasing approval that comes at the cost of your dignity. You start speaking only when it counts. You start cultivating mystery. Because when people don't know what you'll do next, they hesitate. And hesitation is power. And once you learn that, you'll never be weak again.